Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to another episode. Today's episode is about the idea and the archetype of the conqueror. To begin this off, I would like to read two quotes that I feel are incredibly noteworthy. The first quote is from Herbert Kaufman. Only things the dreamers make live on. They are the eternal conquerors. And then a quote from Walt Whitman. This one especially I like. I'll read it again. Oh, while I live, to be the ruler of life, not a slave, to meet life as a powerful conqueror, and nothing exterior to me will ever take command of me. Really, this episode is inspired in, oh my god, this music. Hold on guys, let me, there we go. The idea of the conqueror. The inspiration for this episode is like an accumulation of various events. There's been moments where I would say I have fathomed archetypes of the conqueror. I have wondered about what would kings see beyond themselves. And in Vedanta, there is, for example, the story of Janaka and Ashtavakra. Whoever wants to hear an enlightened yogi have a conversation with a king, check out the Ashtavakra Gita. The concept began from, I guess, the main inspiration for this episode, what gave it momentum, was that I gave an episode recently on self-sabotage. And I looked into the history of the concept of self-sabotage, and the earliest account of it was actually not the term self-sabotage, was the term internal saboteur. And what Carl Jung was saying was pretty much, there's unconscious forces that if we don't make them conscious, they direct our life. And they can lead to sabotage. But I feel that in some sense, when we think of, if we were to now wonder about the internal conqueror, not the internal saboteur. The internal saboteur is in some sense an anarchist conquering. If somebody doesn't care, it's easy to be a conqueror. But if you care and you want to conquer, then there's something, it's a way more different task, you know. Really what it is, it's experiential responsibility for existential continuity. This is the ultimate, but I want to speak about this in the sense of the external and the internal. How can I speak about a conqueror? You know, really, Jesus Christ. How can I speak about a conqueror? Or let me say it this way, anybody who speaks about something for a long time, eventually people will see various angles to how what is being spoken has meaning. For me, inspiration is very simple. In order for a human being to conquer something, there has to be strength. There has to be an acknowledgement of the potential of strength, and at the same time there has to be the importance of why there needs to be anything conquered at all. You know, there's the different kinds of conquerors, we can say. There's external conquerors, let's say, for example, you know, Napoleon Bonaparte. That dude definitely had a conqueror's attitude. There's a quote associated to Napoleon Bonaparte where somebody tells him, "Oh man, that's impossible." And Napoleon's like, impossible isn't a word in a fool's dictionary, you know. And so as if his conqueror's will, it was as if he had a vision. And to attain that vision, there was nothing stopping them. You know, I believe that when somebody is truly honest, and they really look at what is important to them, a sort of force and might finds them either way. But anyways, Napoleon's an example of an external conqueror. Now, if somebody was like Mr.Within, who's an example of an internal conqueror, I would say Lao Tzu. Mainly because he has this quote where he says, you know, conquering others is strength, but conquering yourself, that is true power. When I speak about the internal conqueror, the viewers can acknowledge that it's an archetype. The viewers can acknowledge that it is the manifestation of the archetype as a person. And just like the concept of the inner and the outer exists, with, I would say, more elegant language, it would be as if there are exoteric dimensions, dimensions that relate to the surface of a reality, and esoteric dimensions which relate to the essence of reality. The human being is like an ocean, and consciousness is like looking at the surface of the ocean, not realizing there's a depth to it. Carl Jung and various individuals similar to Carl Jung, they came to this realization that there is an unknown depth to the potential of human intelligence. It's not that there's just the idea of chaos, order, good, evil. It is also the idea that these stay as potentials. A person can externally appear kind, but internally be cruel. You know, a person can internally, you know, let's say a person externally appears cruel, internally is kind, and somebody can appear externally kind and internally cruel. You know, this world is so incredibly designed that most often it is the case that what we see on the surface does not represent the actuality, especially when it comes to people. Why? Because people are in some sense their brains adding something to how they are being. Let me rephrase that. Imagine someone accepting what they are, or someone not knowing who they are, and so they're just present, they're just being in the moment. Now imagine somebody, they have in their mind says, I want to be this. Like, let's say somebody says, I want to be a blacksmith. Okay. It's as if what I'm trying to say is that in the outer realms, we don't see who we are, we see who we are heading towards. Pretty much what I'm trying to say is that the species should not confuse the outer events for the inner realm, for the inner events of the human being. Madness, chaos, war. All of this is because human beings have ignored that their neighbors pretty much have eyes that hold hidden worlds. This idea of the conqueror, pretty much two avenues is opened up. Okay, one is that you're conquering the outer realms. That means you're, in some sense, bringing the moment into ownership. You know, it's pretty much advancement in front of our eyes and advancement behind our eyes. The concept of a conqueror in modern times, due to the fear of man's psychology based on what has happened in history, we ignore the value of the idea of, for example, queens, kings, and conquerors, emperors. This is something that has slipped out of the mind of the modern man to hold an incredible value for the potential of the absolute, in some sense, top of the hierarchy archetype. If we look at our species, you know, there was this show called Dragon Ball Z. When I was a kid, I would watch it, and in it there was this idea of like there was a warrior species, this planet where from the children to the oldest people, they all were like warriors. That means war was like as natural as, in some sense, its absence. When I look at the evolutionary animal that our conscious, abstract minds seem to be possessing now, we have conquered elemental circumstance. What that means is, if there is truly a physical conqueror, it is the DNA. All of our ancestors, regardless of their egos, regardless of their persona, who they were, where they were, it's as if the physical reality, the personality, the body changes, but in some sense a part of it passes on. Technically, it's like when every person dies, and let's say a person has had kids and then they die, it's as if a part of them is still living on, right? There has been times where, I have been very arrogant, but very beautifully arrogant, or I shouldn't say arrogant, but ignorant. And there has been moments in my own solitude where I have fathomed archetypes to myself that are not in the outer realms, but in the inner realms. They have a sort of meaning. For example, in my science fiction, I noticed there's an incredible amount of imagery I have used that I am depicting the psychology of, in some sense, like a sort of a command in the battlefield, In Vedic thought, there was this very profound archetype, this god, and this god's name was Skanda, Skanda, and Skanda was the generalissimo of the gods in Vedic thought, And when I think about just the spirit of conquering, Really what it is that it's like this empty landscape. It's like this empty piece of paper, and after some time there has been like sentences written on this empty piece of paper, and in some sense, how would I tell you, it's like subjects in the void are trying to own objects temporarily, so the subject feels it is limitless. External conquering leads to defeat. Internal conquering usually leads to a sort of success. And dear listeners, I've actually realized I've never said this in any of the episodes, but for anybody who would like to write something, maybe I've said it in one episode, but like anybody who wants to write something and wants me to respond to it, you have to put in context, like literally put context = this in brackets, right? And then I'll know in what context the comment's being shared. So I have a piece of paper in front of me. Unfortunately, my notepad's, on vacation. The notepad that, I think it shows on the screen. But pretty much there's the idea of the conqueror, okay? Pretty much I divide it into an inner realm idea of a conqueror and an outer realm idea. That means a subjective conqueror, a conqueror of subjects, and a conqueror of objects. Now, in reality, it has to be a synchronization of them both. External conqueror, I would say if I was to judge myself from the beginning of my youth, I have been way more pacifist than aggressive, if I was to, in some sense, sing a lament to my own life, it would be, in some sense, how I was cruel to myself, but kind to others. The notion of the conqueror can be seen through a spectrum of morality. You can say there's good conquerors, bad conquerors, but to me, really what a conqueror is someone who has recognized their role in history. Like, I remember reading about Napoleon, and realizing this guy, in his mind, he was already being emperor before he became emperor. Like, that was his conquering through instantaneous knowing. It's as if he knew he had to be attending a certain moment of reality, and because he knew he was meant to be there, there was no fear, there was no imposter syndrome, there was just this feeling that it's as if my eyes are walking that way, In regards to an internal conquering, this is more, I would treat myself as an internal conqueror. Let me tell you why. Because I have spent years, pretty much researching how my imagination works. And I have come to this realization of the nature of reality starting from a movement, and the movement, the moment it has stillness, becomes like an eagle that flies off one branch of knowledge. It becomes the sky, and from the sky can go on any branch. When we talk about conquering, that's a cool way of saying, achieving. Achievement is the polite word for conquer, you know. For example, and it's based on what you set for yourself, right? You know, I remember when I started these talks, I was like, yeah, I'm going to give 10,000 talks. Let's see what it is. After years of doing this now, I'm like, my God, you know, it's like the conqueror that started this, you know, had seen further. I have come to this realization, dear listeners, if somebody's like, all right, I'm listening to this random video on YouTube, what its value is? Its value is that I am looking simultaneously in every moment for the role of the inner life and the outer life, okay? When these two are ignored, when a person ignores their inner life, they in some sense keep their mind unknown and function as just the body. If you ignore your outer life, this is more uncommon, but if you ignore your outer life, you will in some sense move more in your inner life. To move more in your inner life means that after some point, you're going to get used to the instantaneity of manifestation that imagination brings. That means the speed of the mind is faster than reality. Any person who lives as let's say, it's like some people are living as bodies that are howling their minds around, and there's some people who live as minds that are projecting the life in the body, right? I noticed that, you know, a lot of people say that everybody's conditioned, you know, there's ethnocentric programming. It's like there's no way anybody can escape being programmed by the world, and, you know. But I would tell you all of that is dependent on what self is being programmed. That means when there's two ways that insight occurs, okay? There's insight about the observed, and there's insights about the observer. If whoever's listening, usually if you hear these talks of mine, I start off from looking at something outside and then wondering in some sense what is its implication, as in some sense the perception is a bridge from the actual reality to the unknown viewer, right? That means the person should go like, okay, reality is physical, but wait a minute, how do I know it's physical? Then the person realizes it's a brain, and all of physical reality is how our brain is happening. We're never even seeing light, we're seeing light plus our brains happening. You know, we're seeing filtered, just like processed food, we're seeing processed light, you know, or reorganized light. That's the brain's dance, right? Our brains are really potential. So they're potential. I don't know what it is. It's like we're a battery, and the brain can connect this battery to something that it empowers. Do you know? We're like, you know, lost, just like it's like poetically what lost souls were like, you know, batteries, you know, wondering about where the energy should go, you know. And whoever's listening, just to ease your mind, consider me a fool, and then you'll drop all your prejudices, and then you can hear what I'm saying, right? If you consider me something beyond you, you will hate to listen to me. But if you consider me as just somebody, just one creature on a rock in the middle of nowhere, anyways, back to this idea. Let me see where I was. Okay, I'll come to this. An internal conqueror would be as if somebody who is not a self conquering a world, but in some sense a world, the outer conqueror is a self, an individual self conquering the world. And I would say internal conquering is not conquering like a person. It's not the result of a subject. You know, a person may think like, all right, I'm going to plan for something, I'm going to do it, I'm going to have discipline and achieve it, and there, you know, I conquered. But when I say internal conquering, I am not avoiding how deeply the mystics looked at it. the mystics were actually some of the most bravest human beings. People are like, yo, these yogis are escaping society, going into the mountains and sitting. It's like, why was the Buddha sitting by a tree? Why was he not like being a farmer and doing something productive for society, you know? Internal conquering means that before this lifetime ends, we want to know instantaneously what is the nature of that which is viewing through our eyes as us. This was the great mystical quest, you know. And so a clue that was given, you find this in so many traditions, right, where they say life was a dream. In Vedanta, they acknowledge this world as a simulation. Literally, it's as if, I'm not joking, but whoever reads the Upanishads and the Vedas, you're going to realize it's as if people from back in the day in ancient times were describing the world as a video game. In so many yogic texts, they talk about a screen of consciousness. We have a character inside a video game. The character is made of pixels. The world of that character is made of pixels. But what is moving that character is someone sitting in front of the computer screen. It has nothing to do with the pixels. The true nature of what is actually here has nothing to do with how the surface of what is here appears. That means materialism is the surface, you know, of an ocean, and in the depths of this ocean that is here, it's as if it's like, how would I say it? It's like we're the tip of an iceberg that realizes that it is not just the tip of the iceberg. What I feel the advancement of communication for the human species is, and really what the indirect purpose of why we're creatures that can communicate and speak, is for us to come to the realization that energy doesn't have to be a person. But this will happen, I predict, like on a total level, at least in my, you know, let's say playful vision of the future. I've predicted this 3,600 years from now, where the species will have a choice to go beyond what I have termed the language threshold, which is another way of saying right now we are objective biological, we have objective biological bodies, and we have subjective language, story-based, in some sense, minds. So we're literally a subject that's moving an object, or if you're super materialist, you're an object that's hallucinating the subject moving the object. That means it's like, you know, in the same way in a religious narrative, God's will is like what's actually moving everybody, and from the scientific narrative, that the forces of the universe are what is moving us. You know, the idea of the human being is so fragile that one can find more reasons to see that we are not human than to be human. The greatest approach I have found, and this has been really something that has helped me kind of stabilize in my own mystical wanderings, it has been this idea that life is not suffering, it is an opportunity. That is why if somebody was like, Mr.Within, why are you alive? Because there is an unknown opportunity here. There are so many hidden potentials to how the world moves, and sometimes we have to wonder, why are we here in a world that we can be a part of? There has been times where karma really teaches you, karma shows you, you know, in this lifetime, which conqueror you're meant to become. You know, if you're someone from since a child, everything you've been doing, you've just been getting what you want, then life is kind of training you to be an outer conqueror, right? But if you're someone who, let's say, you know, you're like an orphan who's had it rough, like it's as if something about the world is conquering the self rather than the self conquering the world. I have, through my own karmic experiences, come to moments where I have realized how small I am in the outer realms, and in some sense, some moments where I've realized how big I am in the inner realms. You know, there's this idea, they say that it's an ancient term, they say the mind is a lousy master but a great servant. And I remember, I think this was like a year ago or something, I had this very profound moment where I just shouted at my moment, in some sense, any being that is, let's say, from other lifetimes, other moments, other dimensions, that in some sense has been under my control, I released them. Can you imagine releasing the mind that in some sense, you know, was trying to master you, right? How will the advanced humanity emerge? How many battles behind our eyes and in front of our eyes must be fought until a collective victory is achieved? Right now, human beings are entranced by memory. If somebody was like, you know, Mr.Within, what would an alien invasion look like? I would say it would be similar to as if somebody, depending on meaning, based on their memory. You see, pretty much there's, let's say the human mind is an advanced technology, and this advanced technology pretty much provides an ability for us to study the context of self and study the concept of self. Pretty much, guys, just like we have good duality, like good and evil, which are codependent, we have the idea of the individual and collective that are codependent. The idea has never been for people to try to stop being sinners or to be saints, but it's the idea is that in some sense every person is here to find their original state. That's it. You know, it's as if you are a unique design in the realm, and upon the recognition of your own disposition, there's so many different type of people on this planet that honestly, it's like very obvious the future can't be controlled if everybody acts upon their inner realms, you know. It's like this challenging idea in politics where we want to give everybody freedom, but if we all give people freedom let's say you give people in a crowded room freedom to dance, people are going to hit each other. They're going to collide. So it's as if, how do we create a world where everybody's free and yet the expressions, the activations of our potential freedom don't impinge on one another? And the idea is we have to hold a multidimensional context. This is the salvation of the psychology of the human race, is in how it must now realize we have come to a multidimensional phase in history. Because really the dimensions the human being is access, really what are they? It's pretty much the void, then there's the singular, and then there's the dual. That's it. All of life has been happening in these states. I'm telling you. But when you realize there is the multidimensional, it's as if this whole time realizing there was another Earth here, or the Earth that the idea of you stands on is not the same Earth that your feet stand on. To me, the conqueror spirit has two types of outlet as a force. It has an offensive approach and it has a defensive approach. You can say, it's like when a conqueror destroys, we're like, what a bad person, but when a conqueror defends, imagine there was like the most powerful being in the realm, and if the powerful being helps, then he's like a hero, but if the powerful being, destroys, he's evil. Isn't that incredible that human beings actually are not good and evil until they act upon, until they manifest it? Defensively, it would be as if, imagine like we had a group of the greatest conquerors and like a movie, like, they were in a cryo chamber. Imagine we had a cryo chamber of the greatest conquerors in history, or somehow we had some technology that could bring back the greatest conquerors in history. If there was something that was, let's say, if when there's an alien invasion, it's like people need conquerors, but when it's like there's no aliens, it's like conqueror, get out of your chair, Really, I'll tell you, in the New Age community, guys, or just in bookstores, there's a huge thing about self-help, But really, it's all about being capable to become responsible for how you have experienced your existence so far. That's it. If a person can accept their moment, then a new dimension opens up for them to respond to the moment. Anything we cannot accept, we cannot respond to. That means if there is something, let's say, like an archetype of self-sabotage in our unconscious, if we don't accept that there is that potential, right, then in some sense we never get to see if there is such a thing or not. So, anyways, guys, I'll get back to this. My attention is unnecessarily going to the chat section. I'll just remove my attention. Keep the show going, for, my species brethren. Pretty much we are an object and a subject. These two dimensions are present. To conquer the objective realm, the most healthiest way I could say right now currently is to move towards an advanced kingdom. So what that means is, let's say the conqueror wants to be truly a conqueror, and what do conquerors do? In some sense, they establish the kingdom, right? To me, we have reached a point where we can no longer, the species accepts egoic notions of a conqueror, but I realize that we can put a crown on the future. What that means is, in my vision of an advanced civilization for the outer realms of humanity, my idea is that we treat the species as a kingdom. Just like we have the plant kingdom, mineral kingdom, we have the human kingdom, right? Now, if the human kingdom, if there's a living king, then there's like a lot of disputes or whatever. But if we just considered that the king is all the future generations, the crown is on the potential of the future generations, than someone who's alive now, right? So technically it's like an advanced civilization. Its kings and queens will forever be the unborn children in the future, which means we're all servants of the realm. We are serving the journey of a species in the void. It's like, how cool is it, right? I mean, it's super bizarre, existential circumstance-wise, but how incredible it is that man's greatest battle is not just with himself, with others, with the physical content in the world. It is with the unknown. I wrote this short story, A Conqueror Named Time, and in it was pretty much this idea that there was this conqueror named Chaos, Kronos, and then this conqueror is realized he cannot conquer time, so he named his son Time, and his son in the story goes and becomes a conqueror. There are forces here that cannot be personified by the human mind, and they are more existential conditions that influence our psychology rather than sort of animate personas in hidden dimensions. To conquer a subject is, in some sense, to go to the origin. It's hilarious. In the outer realms, the species wanting to conquer time and the unknown would be, in some sense, we bypass extinction, and the species is smart enough to do that, actually. So guys, in the chat section, someone is very politely being rude. But technically, root is duality, so there's, you know, the person's like, I'm offended, but I don't believe in duality. What do I do? This world, there's something they teach. What do you call it? They teach lifeguards near swimming pools that sometimes when somebody's like drowning and you go to save them, the lifeguard has to save the person in a way where the person doesn't drown the one who's trying to save them. I feel the species literally has a bunch of options, and it's not like that many. Pretty much we either everybody just, as from the beginning of time, everybody does what they feel, like everybody just stays in their bubble of freedom, their bubble of personal freedom and whatever they see, or at some point we climb out of the memories that are making us see a world that doesn't belong to all of us. Right, for me, I realize something, that a lot of people who go towards spirituality, they think that they have to be timeless here now. Right, a lot of people think that physicality is not divine, so that means for them to be spiritual, they have to be something aside from physicality, but it's a round circle. It's a round circle where everything you thought was your obstacle, once your ability increases, is no longer an obstacle. I am telling you, it's a shift from suffering to opportunity. If like, imagine you're someone and you're like, okay, I'm alive once in this form. Right now I'm being like 4.5 billion year old evolutionary creature. Should I just, think I'm oneness all the time, or should I in some sense wonder about, okay, something has to be used here? It's as if we are given great technology, if Uncle Ben, like from the Spider-Man scene where Uncle Ben's dying and giving advice to, like, giving life wisdom, to Spider-Man, he says, with great power comes great responsibility. With great technology comes great expressionism. The idea is not for us to stop existing externally, right? In a lot of people who go to mysticism, they have to realize it's something that should naturally pull you. If you force yourself into it, you're not going to be able to tell if the truth is from your mind, if it's from the effort of your mind, or if it's in some sense I don't know how to say it, but unless a person realizes that the self that is the connector of all the memories and also the source of fear and the emotions, it's like all of it is arising from one moment. I realize pretty much this. When in history has the human species had a better capacity to experience its collective life than now? Right? We have so many people on the planet talking about responsibility, cleaning your room, being nice, Mother Teresa out on the planet. But a lot of people are being irresponsible for the future. It's as if people are caring for, like, their grandkids, and then let's say a generation after their grandkids, and then after that they're like, screw it, I can't see that far, and they're not caring for the destiny of a species in the void. To me, it's the most honorable thing in the life that someone can do, right? Another great example, I would say, of an internal conqueror would be Guru Padmasambhava from Tibetan Buddhism. And there's this story of Guru Padmasambhava, where, first of all, guys, something to know, Guru Padmasambhava is technically considered as the second Buddha. and he is the descendant of the Rinpoche line. So there's the Dalai Lama, which is like this reincarnating, it's like the same being, same type of consciousness reincarnating, right? And then there's another lineage where it's Guru Padmasambhava. So anybody who has a last name Rinpoche, it's as if people should just listen to their wisdom, in 2013, I think I broke the record of being the most Tibetan Buddhist Persian guy ever, Guru Padmasambhava, this enlightened being, that legend has it that at the age of 8, he manifested as an 8-year-old kid from a lotus in a pond, and he started going and teaching the water spirits, and a king was passing by, and the king adopts him. Guru Padmasambhava, eventually certain things happen, he goes on this journey, and this story I'm going to tell you is so profound. I don't know, it's like when I read it, it gave me goosebumps, but I'll share it with you. Guru Padmasambhava is this very liberated being, and there's this notion that some states of mind, they have stepped down, and some states of mind have stepped up. Okay? And dear listeners, I'm going to acknowledge the chat section. It's just that I'm going with my inner rhythm of continuing the talk. But I will go over all the chat comments before the end of this episode. Guru Padmasambhava, he just walks towards this edge of this river, and he sees that there's this incredibly beautiful girl crying by the river. And Guru Padmasambhava goes and talks to this beautiful girl and lifts her spirits up, and speaks as Guru Padmasambhava to her. And then there's a spy, and little does Guru Padmasambhava know, this beautiful girl, this beautiful woman is a princess. And a spy from the king sees Guru Padmasambhava with the princess, and suddenly guards come and take Guru Padmasambhava in front of the king. And in that instant, the princess starts to get horrified. She knows what's coming. And it's just like an epic movie scene, let's say like an intense movie scene. Guru Padmasambhava is brought in front of the king, and a sort of mob mentality is arose, and the people are in such poverty that all they can do is just shout at something, So the mob mentality is there. They're like, yeah, we don't know who's gonna die, but let's see, And so the king says, you who have dared go close to the king's daughter, you will be executed. And you will be in some sense burnt in front of the town, in front of the kingdom. The princess is screaming at her father, at the king, but the king's ego is standing in a way where he's acting like he is the conqueror of the outer realms. The king is like an external conqueror archetype. It's like the princess's voice goes unheard. And so there's a moment where Guru Padmasambhava just looks at the princess, just stares as if and smiles, and he goes willingly, like the guards let go of him, and he goes and sits in the middle of the ground where there's these piles of wood which they're gonna burn, right? He goes and sits in the center. As I'm sharing this story, guys, keep in mind the difference between an internal conqueror and an external conqueror. Guru Padmasambhava goes and sits in the middle of that fire. They actually start the fire and the flames grow bigger, the princess is screaming, the mob is cheering. And something ends up happening which changes the life of everyone there forever. The crowd is shouting at first. Suddenly, the voice of the crowd gets lower, lower, lower. Then suddenly, the mob's rage has turned into gasps. Everybody's gasping. Everybody's getting shocked. And as the flames die down, it's Guru Padmasambhava is sitting there in like a meditation pose, and he is untouched, as if the flames did not touch him, as if he was so liberated beyond this physical realm that even the periodic table knew its place in front of the divine. So the element of fire, the fire spirits do not even touch him. And in some sense, the king is shocked. The princess is shocked, and in some sense, the unknown has allowed the reinvention of divinity in the moment. Guru Padmasambhava stands up, and the story ends in a hilarious way, because the king offers the princess to Guru Padmasambhava, and Guru Padmasambhava gets married. To me, that's an example of an internal conqueror. A person who has understood the nature of the mind before the body could fear its own demise. There's another story I just remembered. I'll share this. This story is about this warlord that pretty much hated monks. So this is a different story. This warlord hated monks. He felt these monks were useless, you know? And so he's like, I'm gonna build barracks where these monks are, kill all the monks. And he gives this command, this warlord, to his bandit army, and his army goes on killing, all the monks. And there's one city where the warlord goes in there, right? And then suddenly, one of the commanding officers comes to the warlord and says, "There's a problem." Right? And the warlord says, "There's a problem? I'm a fucking warlord. What do you mean there's a problem?" The warlord is told that all the monks have ran away, and there's this old monk in front of a temple. And this old monk has closed his eyes and is sitting in the grass, just in a meditation pose, and he's so peaceful that nobody wants to kill him, right? And the warlord gets angry, and the warlord's like, take me to this. Take me to this guy. And so the warlord goes and suddenly sees this monk sitting on the grass, sees his army kind of standing there. And the warlord just shouts, just like, in some sense, how would I say it? Like a lion roars at its prey, A lion doesn't roar at its prey, but you know what I mean? Like, it's like it roars at, like, hyenas or whatever. This warlord shouts and says, "Monk, come here right now." The monk gently stands up, as if his inner peace is untouched. He walks to the warlord. The warlord looks at the monk and says, "Do you know who I am? I can have my sword in your stomach in an instant." That means he's saying, I can destroy you in an instant. And the monk looks at there's this intense pause, this intense moment, and the monk looks at the warlord and says, "Do you know who I am? I can have your sword in my stomach in an instant," as if he is saying, you cannot kill what is alive. What is life? If it is beyond the body, It does not die like the body. The mystery of the human mind surpasses shape. And perhaps there is a secret space is keeping from our own eyes, you know. That Zen master, that monk, was in some sense an internal conqueror. He had conquered the need for an idea to be the salvation of a moment so much more grander and multidimensional than the idea. You see, sometimes you have to free, you know, yourself from the world. Most people know this, but sometimes you have to free the world from yourself. This is not externally. I am not in no way saying this to, it doesn't make sense in the external. In the outer realms, 4.5 billion year old evolutionary opportunity. In the inner realms, we have to not just let go of how the world has been, but we must let go of how we have held the world that has been. What I'm trying to say is that free will is not an ego. It is the potential of the whole moment before the ego animates. What free will is an ability to instantaneously know, because the nature of consciousness is that there's literally what we are being is an instantaneous relationship between attention and energy. So space and let's say energy they are simultaneously being one point, and in that point it's like an antenna space where I would say what our personalities truly are the sunbeams of. It's like that hidden sun is not here. What I'm trying to say is that the body transitions, you know, but the mind is never the essence of the mind, poetically the unknown witness of the, let's say, invisible subjectivity. It is the inconceivable. And this is why I'm saying the unknown. In so many talks I've said this. This is to me I would say my ultimate realization about nature. The unknown is unknown. That means there is no knowledge, no limited knowledge of mankind that can define the limitless universe. So we are left in our self-simulations until the species wakes up to a collective vision. You know? To me, the conquerors of the future, they are going to be so smart that they will do it benevolently. Why? Because the most advanced state doesn't need to prove it's advanced. The reality is there on its own. Pretty much a person's authenticity is how much effort they're putting in the moment. For example, if somebody who lies, you're putting a lot of effort. So you gotta maintain that effort. Do you know? But if you're simple, if you don't fear how simulations can break, and you will eventually come to a moment of stillness and silence, which is the beginning of all narratives. Those who become content with how the space of their mind is being the whole moment where their body is in. We have never been in our bodies. The bodies have been in the presence of an unknown space. Which is another way of saying the invisible has realized finally that the visible is how can I tell you, the stepping stone. It's the mirror. It's like a field, it's like an invisible field of energy, right, or field of intelligence, is experiencing itself as a manifest phenomena. And you know what's hilarious? It's like in religion, they have the idea of like demons possessing, right? And we have in, I would say, the sort of what is possessing the human and from a secular scientific perspective is the universal laws, or it is the constants, you know, the constants that keep the significance of it. A species must conquer fear. The greatest fear, if somebody was like Mr.Within, if I could conquer one fear, that would somehow be conquering all the fears at once. I would say your fear of the unknown. Because regardless of how people act, we are all headed to the unknown. This is the bizarreness of life. It's the, other side of the coin of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. We start from the unknown rather than starting from the known, going into the unknown, back into the known. You start from the unknown, and the concept of reincarnation, technically from a Vedic standpoint, it continues if you identify with shape. And it's very easy to be a shapeless being because that being is unconditional. It's like nobody has a problem being energy right now, right? Because our view of energy is more like, if it's something that cannot be created or destroyed, it is in some sense something that cannot have shape in a changing world. Something that unifies. I am telling you, we're reaching the era of the global humanity. Like, we're reaching a point where we are realizing all cultures have certain universalist perceptions in common. I ask myself, what was the purpose of the past, and I see that I'm existing right now, and I ask myself, what is the purpose of the present, and then only the future's existence. That is, to me, like, I would say the closest thing to divinity, right? It's as if, imagine, let's say a sort of, I'm going to say this poetically, let's say there's a character, a person, and this person, let's say, had a shamanic, let's say, opening to their perception, and in some sense, they pretty much, let's say, they could notice the presence of the invisible within their own visible personality. There's 8 billion of us here. We are the most advanced evolutionary species in the outer realms, and when it comes to our minds, more than people should live repeated lives of their past. They must in some sense discover the future. So if there's any questions or comments, they're welcome in the chat section. My room temperature iced cappuccino is incredible. The idea is conquer or be conquered by the outer realms. Pretty much the inner realms has to put an effort of continuity. Human beings should just release themselves from the chains of duality. Duality must be acknowledged. I'm saying, let me rephrase what I'm saying. All that mysticism can be, all that the mystery of the realms can lead to. I am a person who, I am making this bold claim. I've designed this system. I call it Ring of the Absent Heaven. And pretty much I use 4 symbols to show 4 quadrants to all ideological systems. I honestly feel this idea, this thing I've the subjective thing I've designed. It holds everything. So pretty much the 4 quadrants to, the consciousness of existence is that you look at life and it's empty. It is literally the number 0, the 0 dimension, first quadrant. One of the quadrants. The other quadrant is the singular dimension. So we went from looking at all of life and being like it equals 0. Right now, the mind went to it equals 1. So empty space was 0, and then matter in manifestation was in some sense like a singularity in the void. A singular event. It's like the universe cooled down and existence is the manifestation is its crystalline structure. The 0 dimension is the void. People who don't acknowledge this, artificial ideological happiness is going to blindfold them. There is something here greater than our matter, greater than our thoughts, greater than our emotions. There is the presence of an energetic witness that is being. The simplicity of this is an enlightenment on its own. From the 0 dimension, we have the 1 dimension. The idea of the 1 dimension is the idea of the singular, the idea of the individual. The idea of God could also be seen as that. Then, so that means there's a way to look at life and being like, okay, nothing has meaning. There's a way to look at life, which is the singular dimension, which is everything has meaning, the 1 dimension. And then there is the 2 dimension, and the 2 dimension is really duality. This can be even taught to children, 0, 1, 2. In the dimension of duality, we find language, personality, time, stories of meaning, right? So right now, me speaking to you, I am speaking through, I would say, it's a dualistic context. Chaos, order, right? That means somebody could look at reality, be like, okay, it doesn't mean anything. Okay, everything means everything, Everything is the meaning. And somebody could look at it and be like, the dance of chaos and order is the meaning. That means you could choose to live in a dualistic mindset, but I am telling you there's ways, there's states of mind that the future generations will pretty much look at us and be like, wow, our ancestors didn't know what they had access to. That's it. The future generations are going to realize that we have been carrying a great potential. This might be a very cool statement to say, but it's as if there are hidden reservoirs of truth as backup systems to a falsehood. Now, beyond the two dimension, beyond duality, this is really for the future I'm speaking for. It's the infinite dimension. What does that mean? That means you can look at life and be like, yo, it has no meaning. It is infinity experiencing a finite existence. Literally, we can just envision the destiny of the species to just go all around the cosmos and pretty much have sex all over the cosmos. I mean, that's the purpose of the biological human being. The existential purpose. Infinity is the host, the duality is the host, or the singular, or the void, or when I say ring of the absent heaven, the cycle. That means void beings want to be singular beings want to be dualistic beings want to be infinite beings get bored from infinity and want to be void again. You know, this world is never designed to just be like it really what it is. It's like a terminal in an airport. It's like an airport for multidimensional beings. Just by the idea of there being an unobservable universe, it's like, you know, we drop our pens and wonder about how far experience can now go. The role of the internal conqueror I would recommend that if it's activated offensively, it would become an ego destined for, you know, breaking, right? But if it is used as a sort of guardian backup system, that means imagine the human species had a great power, and this power could in some sense go to, you know, chaos or order, and, you know, like, I'm just saying that we have explored the dimensions of the body. Now, by realizing we're the unknown witness of the mind, we can explore the mind. And so it's like the species should be treated as like one giant research project of truth, you know? If a person seeks a freedom beyond ideology, they will discover experiential presence, and a part of that experiential presence, due to being unknown, allows for novelty to re-emerge. When a person thinks they know everything, it's like a tip of an iceberg convinced of everything, right? So in some sense, there's the internal conqueror can only be activated when the external conqueror is seen to be, in some sense, it's like the chaos. It's as if like things took so long to get here that for there to be a sort of breaking of them is like an ignorance, you know? I envisioned it in what I call Civilization 2.0. Those people who would like to be involved in this, you know, there's more details in the membership area. There will be, and Really what it is I'm saying, we have an inner realms and outer realms. There's a mind and body. The purpose of the body is, in some sense, we continue in a healthy way, and in order to continue in a healthy way, we need to have an advanced knowledge of health. Therefore, inevitably, it will lead to an advanced civilization. The purpose of human physical existence is to build the most advanced civilization and collective expression known in this universal sector, as if when man ascends to the galactic spheres, he is in some sense as if marching in, as if fear was our past life, and now the life of the fearless, the life of the eternity that needs no condition. Alan Watts says, imagine going to sleep and never waking up. And, he says, imagine waking up having never gone to sleep. That waking up having never gone to sleep is the initial origin of, I would say, that conqueror's might, which in some sense, if you're decent, it's as if paradise exists poetically. If you are indecent, it's as if you don't get to see your own efficiency in the life. Some people are like, what's the point of honesty? To get to see what you are before anything else needs to be layered upon it. What would the most advanced freedom be? It would be instantaneous. Behind our eyes, we advance communication, and advanced communicators to someone who discovers that they're the most advanced communication of the universal sector. And so this synchronization between the outer and the inner realms, it's as if we, on some end, become the most advanced beings in serving the mind of the species, and the most advanced civilization, which is serving the body of the species. We honor all the dimensions of our eyes while we have them. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. Much blessings and namaste.